And here we are. What a day. Hello, Luca.
Hello, Lucas. I was following the day on streaming, so quite interesting one, eh?
Great. And we need to close it with another very interesting topic. Thought-provoking, in fact. LGBTQ plus inclusion as a warranty for the future. Here to talk about it, Luca Condosta, Global Leadership Learning Ecosystem Community Lead, LGBTQ plus Global Project Lead at ABB. Most formally, welcome, sir.
Thank you very much, Lucas, and good morning, good afternoon, everybody, eh?
And good evening in some cases.
And good evening in case,
Um,
yeah, you're right.
Luca, can you give us a little bit of your personal background to the questions I'm going to ask you ahead of those questions? Is there anything you would like to share of your specific perspective on the area of responsibilities you have at ABB?
Sure, I can. I mean, I'm a finance person, I have a deep experience in finance since 20 years, and I decided to, let's say, step up a couple of years ago inside ABB in order to drive the expansion of the D&I journey in the area of LGBTQ+. And, I always try to emphasize the fact that I come from finance and now I move into corporate leadership because I think that was really a big important step for me as a leader, to give back to the people that I met in the company over the last years, but also on the other side to show what I think leaders should do, which is taking responsibility and also try to drive a change in the organization where we work. And that was really the fundamental decision I took some years ago for private reason, but then also I exported, I would say, in the company where I work, which is ABB. And I'll tell you more based on your question, Lucas.
Well, so let's start. How do you create a sense of urgency on LGBTQ plus topics, especially from the business standpoint?
Right. So in our case, what I did is that I was coordinating North America and Northern Europe when it comes to the global business service industry, no? And being often on the road, I realized that there were two main elements that I pointed out to our management. The first one was that the organization was already ready to embrace a wider sense of diversity and inclusion. So in ABB some years ago, we were still talking only about the men and women, and I noticed that, for example, talking about LGBTQ plus was, I don't want to say a taboo, but was something not openly communicated in the company. And talking to the people of course, in the Northern Europe was quite an open topic, but also in North America, it was a topic where I said the organization is ready. We should do one step forward. On the other side, the sense of urgency was also created because coordinating the GBS center. So we have a big center, by the way, in Krakow, no? So we got to know some people who said when I joined ABB, and they were coming, for example, from other companies like, for example, Microsoft, Google, but also, for example, from TCS and so on. They were not feeling welcome because they said, it looks like, we are a little bit backdated and we don't feel welcome as LGBTQ plus community simply because you don't talk about that. And these two factors were a little bit, let's say, the provocative element I use to move the needle in Zurich, where I live, to make sure that also the top management understood the sense of urgency that we had, because we could miss really opportunity in attracting and retaining key talent for example, the GBS organization.
And tell me, how do you create a structured program to enhance inclusion for the LGBTQ plus?
Right. So, and that's where the Lucas, going back to the intro, that's where the finance aspect comes into the place, because I'm a project manager per nature. So when I took over this project, I said we need to have a clear deliverable, but we also need to have a clear structure. So we created 7 building blocks, and then we were working on the leadership, we were working on employee resource groups, we were working on the ally, we were working on the policy, uh, KPI monitoring, and so on. The idea of these 7 building blocks was really to, let's say, chop the problem into pieces and understand what needs to be done in every single piece. I give you a couple of examples. We started really from the top, because in a culture like the ABB one, it was important that there was a full commitment from the executive committee, and therefore one of the first steps was to sign up the United Nations Code of Conduct, and then also to nominate an AC sponsor from the beginning. And this was an important step because in a company which is manufacturing like ABB, having the tone from the top opens all the door when it comes to the rest of the organization. And another point which is very close to my heart is really about the policies. So since the beginning, we identified which policy do we need to modify. So the first one was, for example, the parental leave to be gender free. And then we had, for example, policy about the mobility. How can you make sure if people get asked to go, for example, to Saudi, they may say no without compromising their career, or the selection of the vendor, or, for example, policy related, for example, to the equalization of the benefit for the partner of same-sex type of couple, and so on. Have we done all this? Of course, no. But for example, we started with the parental leave policy, and now the game is really in changing all the other policies which can generate an impact on our employees. Because the policy, they create a framework where the topic doesn't become any longer a personal topic of a country manager or personal topic of a manager in that particular situation, but it becomes a way of working in the company. And I'm strongly supportive the change of policy because I think by changing the policy, you create an environment where everybody feel really safe.
Speaking of creating an environment where everybody is feeling safe, how do you leverage employees' energy to actually support the Pride Network?
Yeah, it's a good question because we started 1 year ago actually the program in practice, and we started with very few people. I saw Daria was before in one of the panel, and actually she was also helping us driving the topic, for example, in certain countries. And we decided to have workshop last year really to define, for example, how an employee resource group can work. We set up a guidelines which is basically telling you what an employee resource group should do, because I hate when people think an employee resource group is just a bunch of people having coffee together and talking about the topic. But every group now has a mission, in our case, which is strongly related to the overall strategy of ABB, but it's also very local related. So if I look, for example, in Latin America, we had a topic about the macho culture, and this came quite evident. And therefore, the mission, for example, of the group in Latin America was really about addressing this macho culture and create safety for everybody to be who they want to be in the office, and so on. So we try to vehiculate this energy of people, first of all, finding them in the organization, creating a platform that could catalyze those people into the employee resource groups, and then also let them come out with what were the top topics to be addressed. So we did a fantastic Pride this year, and the Pride was really covering several aspects from why it's important to talk about LGBTQ+, what are the issues when you do coming out, but also what other companies are doing, where is the economical case. And, in this way, everybody could feel involved. And, last June, we had something like less than 400 people at the beginning of Pride, but after Pride Month, they became now 800 people, which is a huge number of people if you think mobilized. And now the challenge is how
It
can
is.
you keep them active, no? Because that's also what you want to do with those resources that you have.
Luca, tell me, before I ask you about resistance, because I'm sure you still come
Mm,
across resistance in infinite varieties, let's come back to the topic itself, LGBTQ plus inclusion as a warranty for the future. In
mm.
what sense do we say warranty for the future?
Yeah, actually, this is a statement coming from one of our country manager of Eastern Europe in ABB. I will not disclose the name, but it was really a statement from him because when I was presenting what we were doing globally, and I say, okay, what should we do in your country? He said to me, look, if you would have approached me some years ago, I would have, probably not even had a meeting with you on this topic. But then he said to me, the more I have new generation coming into the organization, the more I understand how really open they are towards inclusion and equality and LGBTQ plus. And the more I understand this is not a topic for them, or actually is a topic we need to fight for to make it really equal and real. And therefore I had a thought around this and I say, yeah, you know what, it really makes sense because the new generation, and if you look at the workforce of the future. The workforce of the future is basically made by people they work more for value than for money. They will have, and that's the beauty of the future, they will have the possibility to choose a company or topic where they feel more welcome also from a value standpoint. And therefore, if you want as a company to attract more talent, your warranty is really to become more inclusive. So when I say the expansion to LGBTQ plus is for sure, especially in countries like Eastern Europe, is a topic that companies must do, because the generation of the youngster, they care about the values and they care about the signal that the company is sending outside the company itself, independently from what is the political situation a company, or let's say, sorry, the political situation a country is in. And that's the beauty of the power of the multinationals, because they can really capture this energy that you have on the floor and make the most out of it in a safe environment.
Luca, your story reminded me of a conversation I had myself. It's yet another example that sometimes you need a little bit of constructive pressure for things to become a serious conversation. Like, for instance, here in Krakow, a decade ago, more or less, air quality was a massive issue. Things started
Mm.
to change, and I remember having a conversation with head of a business association long time ago, trying to persuade the organization to become much more active in engaging employees and creating bottom-up initiatives around air quality issues. And there was a lot of resistance back then. It was believed to be an irrelevant topic for business companies, etc., etc. But at the end of the day, with more pressure coming, businesses started setting up their own ERG groups, so to say, around air quality issues, and they are now extremely active. Even though we are at a much later, much more mature stage, air quality is no longer such a huge issue anymore. So that's just a comparative idea. That brings me to questions we are getting from our audience. Some of them really interesting ones. Antoni is asking, what advice shall we give to those who are still afraid of taking up the subject authentically and practice rainbow washing instead? I take it.
Yeah. I mean, it's a good question. And when I step up in ABB, I decided really not to even think about the pink washing or rainbow washing, or whatever you want to call. And for me, I mean, the real advice is understand, where is the business case for it in your company, and then, make it happen in a structured way. And when I say structured way, I really mean change the policy, because only if you change the policy, the environment become inclusive. And the beauty of it is that when you change the policy because of LGBTQ+, you will discover other things. I'll give you an example. When we changed the policy for parental leave at ABB, we realized, for example, that there were some gap in the policy, also in the case of single parent, for example, a single mother. But also in the case that is the worst that can happen is when you have an hetero couple and, for example, straight couple, and the woman or the mother of the kid, for example, dies during the when she's giving birth to the kid. So these pieces were not really covered. And when you open the box of the policy, you can really address not only from the LGBTQ plus angle, but you can use the LGBTQ plus angle basically to review certain policy from an inclusive standpoint. And the other important thing that I say is that by injecting pills of LGBTQ plus everywhere, people will become more open in general, because what we created, for example, in ABB is a platform that can be scaled up, for example, when it comes to abilities, when it comes to age, when it comes to minorities, when it comes to uh, different races, for example, in certain region like the Latinos in US and so on. Because of course the way of working is always the same, and you have just to replicate and amplify the message until it becomes a known message anymore. And this is super important for me. I said we have to keep on elevating the message on LGBTQ plus until it becomes a known message, until people say, yeah, okay, we got it, and the policy is there. Okay, let's move on.
And in that sense, having an LGBTQ policy becomes a catalyst for a much broader D&I discussion, doesn't it? Two more
Indeed.
questions,
Yeah.
Jarek and Magda. Jarek and Magda, Jarek is asking, last June our company published a lot of materials on Pride Month. Some employees reacted violently, demonstrating hatred in comments. What would you do if you were a member of the board? I take it at this company. Magda, in case of already existing company that is not very familiar with D&I, Should we wait for the organization to be ready to step into the wider sense of diversity topics? As you mentioned, for example, not only gender issues, or should we introduce D&I in all its aspects from the beginning?
Hmm. Yeah, interesting question. The first one is a very nice one, especially because whoever was Jarek, you said, right? So you're not alone, Jarek. I mean, we had a similar experience also on our side. When we published a first video where I was standing up together with our EC member talking about LGBTQ+, and I didn't mention anything about my private life. I was only playing the card of a global leader, well recognized in the company. We got a lot of comments. It was the most displayed video in ABB in 2020 in our intranet. And most of those comments were positive, but I can tell you some of the comments were really super nasty. And it was perfect because, I think sometimes you have to bring the fish on the table. And in this case, bringing the fish to the table was super important because what our top management saw, they saw basically that certain people, but certain, I want to say certain geographies or certain categories of not even categories, but let's say certain people were pointing out really some nasty comment, and this means that the organization is not ready for it. Even if you think at board level you're the most inclusive company, the reality is that is not there. And this was a slap in the face for many people. And that's where I got even more sense of urgency because I said, independently from what we say in the fantastic Zurich, the reality is that people are telling us that we should not talk about this. We should not care about the gender-free toilet. We should not care about, same-sex couple because this is against the Bible or whatever. So we were really going in this direction. And then the important thing that we did, for example, I personally say to each one of them, especially the nasty one, I say, if you want, we can have a talk. So my agenda is updated, feel free, and we can have a coffee. I try to understand your point of view. And I think when you offer your hand to people to say, okay, tell me what is your view, a lot of them, they came back. No, they step back. They say, okay, yeah, okay, no, sorry, maybe I was too rude. So I think this also gives them a little bit of a sense of that the problem is real because if I offer, my time to talk to you, to many of them, it means that probably this is something real and we have content. And then the second question is, DNI, I would say, why wait? Every leader can change the context where we operate. And we, as a leader, I would say, everybody can be a leader. I also said in the speech in our Pride Month this year, I said, everybody has a power. You have the power when you hire your colleagues. You have the power to make your colleague happy with a coffee. Maybe I'm Italian, so that's why I play a lot with coffee. But, you can really have a power to influence the organization, at least from you below. So I think you can still insert pills of D&I even if you don't have an holistic program on D&I. And then you can start and then you will see once you start, there is no way back. That's the beauty of it. So with Pride, we started, we are now 800 people. There is no chance we can go back. So like it or not, it will come. And if you want to lead the way, I would say take the chance to step up and maybe write a letter to your CEO and see what he says or she says.
And last but not least, Luca, just to bridge our discussion with my last question, coming back to the title of the discussion, what are the
Mhm.
long-term effects expected by enhancing inclusion on LGBTQ plus? Because all
Yeah,
of
in my
these
view,
are practically
true.
long-term. So what would you list as top long-term effects?
Mm. I think, in my view, for sure, there will be a better climate in the company because it's not about LGBTQ plus, it's really about inclusion, and that's when the magic happens. So I think with that, we will have a better inclusive company that can basically increase the morale of the employee, can reduce the employee kind of attrition rate, and then on the other side, you will have also positive, let's say, branding kind of result. So these are all side effects I tell you. So it's not that I'm focusing on the branding because, for example, as a manufacturing company, in our case, it's not really a business to consumer, but so the brand is a relatively importance when it comes to the LGBTQ plus. But I think it's important that you can position yourself as an employer as a fair place to work where it makes sense to spend your time all the day. And if you can do that, I think the result will come directly from people because the people they would like to keep on working for you and they will give all their energy to do their best job every day. And if you achieve that, I would say as a leader, you already have done half of your job.
Luca, I know I said the last question, but the very
Okay, you
last
have one.
question comes from
Go for it.
Isabella. Uh, Isabella, in all honesty, I struggle to talk to people who are violent and aggressive towards LGBTQ plus community. How do you still find strength and, even more importantly, the patience to try to listen and connect?
Yeah, I think, when you have even nasty comment, when you have violence, when you have anything, you can react with the same type of approach, but then you get exactly, a kind of a fight that doesn't bring anywhere. Or you can ignore. But then when you ignore, you pay the price that potentially that piece is kind of growing. So I think, and I really believe in personal leadership. I think we have a responsibility with the help maybe sometimes of someone if we don't feel completely comfortable about ourselves. And I can tell you also, I use all my strength now that I'm 42, but I was not like that 10 years ago, for example. I think we have a responsibility really to step up and to stand up for what is right and what is wrong. Because if we don't do, then we cannot complain. That's always what I say to my colleagues. If you don't change the things, don't complain about the things that do not work. So if in a company you know that people are, aggressive, even in the vocabulary, or they are making jokes, about LGBTQ plus, so that's the type of violence maybe translated into a work environment. If you don't address this topic, then you cannot complain, unfortunately. And there are different ways you can address. You can address through your HR, you can address with a group of people. So for example, with Daria, we created this employee resource group in Poland to create a safe space where people can really feel welcome in ABB in Poland, despite the overall political situation that they can experience. Of course, outside the company, it's not something we can control, and that's where the government they should do something to, let's say, protect a certain event not to happen.
Ironic as it is. Luca Condosta, Global Leadership Learning Ecosystem Community Lead, LGBTQ plus Global Project Lead at ABB. Luca, it's been a pleasure to have you with us. Thank you for finding the time.
Hey, thank you very much, Lucas, and thank you everybody for listening.